Service Lab is a community of service design doers and the service design curious. We meet up every few months to share our learnings with each other. Hi everyone, such a fancy space we're in. Thank you so much for coming to the first in-person Service Lab that we've had for quite a long time. Thank you. Can I get a show of hands on who's been to a Service Lab before? Okay, so I reckon that's like maybe 60% are new. So we're going to tell you a little bit about Service Lab. Service Lab is a space for practitioners to share experiences, inspire each other and learn new things. It's a really kind, warm and welcoming community. So hopefully you will get a bit more time at the end of today to do some networking as well with people. Before we go any further, I'm going to hand over to Jeanette, who's going to tell you a little bit more about this beautiful space that we're in.
Hello. Yes, I'm not going to give you a tour of London, but welcome to BT Group, which is the home of EE, BT, and PlusNet. If that was a bit muddled, I'm Jeanette Clement. I'm the head of service design in the consumer parts of BT and EE, and this is my wonderful team of service designers. So if you have any questions or you get lost, then you'll see their faces dotted around. I should have put the names underneath the circles. I think I've got the exciting task of telling you where the toilets are and the fire exits. Fortunately, they're close to each other, near where you came in, next to the lifts. Hopefully, you won't need them at the same time. Just to give out a little bit of a shout out, we have got some vacancies for service designers. If anyone's interested, do just come up to me and. You can ask me questions, or I'll happy to share my email afterwards, or ask any of these people what it's like to really work here. But yeah, I'll hand back to Charlie, and yeah, big thank you for organising all the wonderful speakers.
Big round of applause to BT. Thank you. So we're just going to tell you a little bit more about the organising team that happens behind Service Lab. But before I go any further, I've got to do a massive shout out to Jenny, who sat right at the back. But Jenny is actually the original co-founder, along with Rupert, of Service Lab. I'm going to guess we're 8 years ago now, maybe? Around that. So I've been running it, the torch was handed over. I've been running it for about 5 years or so. And then we've got Best and Charlie, who've been running it for about 6 months with me. So yeah, we're a motley crew of organisers that come together. We really just enjoy kind of getting to learn from some fantastic speakers. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself, and then we'll pass on to the other organisers as well. So my name is Charlie Pothickery. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a freelance user researcher and service designer. I set up my own little thing, Inclusively, which is mainly just me and occasionally some really lovely other freelancers as well. I tend to work on things a lot in the healthcare space, a lot in the government space, a lot in charity sector, and generally the thing that I kind of am most passionate about is making the world a more inclusive and accessible space. I'm going to hand on to Best, who's going to tell you a bit more about herself. And I'm also going to do a quick visual description. So we're always trying to make sure that this event is as inclusive and accessible as we can be. We're also always thinking that quite a lot of people tend to listen to this event and go for a walk. So we're going to do visual descriptions for ourselves, and the speakers are going to do that as well. So for anyone that's listening to us on a podcast, or for anyone with any visual impairments, I am a fairly short woman with long brown hair. I've got bright coloured earrings on, and I've got a green top on, and I'm white, and I'm wearing my favourite trainers, which are orange and white. I'm going to hand on to Bess now.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Bess. My pronoun is she, her, and visual description, I'm a Southeast Asian woman with kind of like long hair, black hair, wearing a pink sweater, trying to bring the colorful color to the winter, and jeans and white trainers. I'm a service designer currently working in IT services for a brand Consul, Southwark, and Lewisham. Anybody work there? If you have any IT problem, Okay. If not in general, that's all right as well. We'd love to hear all the experience. So yeah, well, the team is very new. We're trying to improve the experience for all the employees because we know how important IT services is to the all the workers, or the user, or the employees. Yeah. Thank you. I'll hand over to Charlie.
Hi, I'm Charlie. My pronouns are she, her. I'm wearing all black. I'm a white woman with short brown hair. I'm a freelance service designer. I'm really excited that you're all here and we're all talking about service design today. And you can also follow me on LinkedIn. I talk about service design and I've got a newsletter also about service design. So yeah, I'm excited to hand back to the other Charlie and hear more.
And the last organiser is Rupert, who can't be with us today, but Rupert does a load of stuff for us in the background. Rupert's also a freelance service designer and started Service Lab alongside Jenny about 8 years ago. You might have seen some posters up. We are recording so that more people can enjoy these in-person events. We've actually been really overwhelmed by the amount of people that wanted to come in. I think we sold out within about a week and a half, and there's a wait list. So I think maybe some of you saw a LinkedIn post that I put up a little while ago when we were looking for event spaces. We're still looking for event spaces and maybe bigger ones, but we're trying to make sure that still when we're going to do some more in-person ones in the future, that people can still join in with them if we can't find big enough spaces. So without further ado, I'm going to start doing a bit of an intro to why we're all here, which is ethical design. We've got an amazing array of different speakers tonight. So we're going to hear from Daniel, we're going to hear from Kat, Kate, Maisie, Disha, and Afreen. Here's the kind of rough running order. Just to note, we might run over a little bit. There's a lot of different speakers. We want to make sure that you've got a bit of time at the end to kind of network as well. But I'm going to pass on to Charlie, who's going to do an introduction to Daniel.
Thank you, Charlie. So Daniel is our next speaker. Daniel is going to talk about supporting ethical design within communities. And he's a freelance service design lead. He's a business designer. I'll hand straight over. And Daniel, you're welcome to do a visual description of yourself for anybody listening.
Fantastic. I'm not too sure if this mic works. It does? Perfect. I'll probably not use that because there's another mic.
You need to use both, sorry.
I need to use both, okay. I'll use both, that's fine. Technology, right? As a service designer. So hello, my name is Daniel Tuitt. I work as a service designer. I've been doing it for too many years now. My pronouns are he and him. I am, how do I even start with describing myself? I am a average African Caribbean man with long dreads up to my shoulders, or just beyond my shoulders. I'm wearing a yellow jacket shirt with some yellow trainers and blue jeans. So, hopefully this works. No, I'm going to just click on. There we go. So then, I'm going to introduce my talk, which is supporting basically communities, which is always so important to me. So, give it a second, something's going on. Quit, there we go. No, it's fine, that's working. So a bit about me. For the last 12 years, I've been working as someone that's focusing on strategy, design, innovation, and a lot of that has linked to service design. So 8 years ago, I converted to being an official service designer. I've worked with a whole host of different companies within management consultancy firms, agencies, all that fun stuff. Some of these companies you may have seen before. I have worked with BT before on a particular project, I think 3 years ago now, which was a lot of fun. Also a lot of pressure, but enough about that. But I've got a bit of a portfolio career now, so as well as being a freelancer, a portfolio career means I can do a lot of what I really enjoy as well. So I still work with these large organisations, but I love to feed my soul, which is the ability to give back. So supporting communities, non-profits, startups, basically anyone that needs support. So leveraging experience that I've had over the last 12 or so years and supporting those that need it the most. Because I think everyone across every single element needs to really embrace service design to make things better over time. So then, can anyone tell me what this is? A bench. There we go. You win the prize today. I don't know what the prize is, but you win a bench. It's funny because sometimes when we think about design, we think about benches, we think about designing something that looks nice, but sometimes benches can be harmful. And there's this whole process called inhuman design sometimes where we're designing something, but it negatively impacts people indirectly. So this is a bench that's basically enables people that are rough sleepers or homeless people where you can't actually use the bench itself, so people have to actually sleep on the floor. And this is really impactful, especially when it comes to ethics and designing good things for not just the users that might be paying for it, but also the wider communities as well that could be impacted over time. So trying to consider who are some of those users and how they're impacted is really important. Which leads me to why we're here today. I think there's a little bit of issue with the slides, but that's fine. It's one thing, and I learned this luckily halfway through my career, but it's one thing about speaking about things you really care about. I think most service designers here, we want to do good. Anything we create, we design, we fix, we improve. We want to make sure that there's an ethical trace of positive support there for everyone that's impacted by the new design or service. And this is what I'm really here to talk about today. So I've put this together, or Sharon put this together, but this is something I've really, really cared about over the years. There's something called a privilege wheel, and what you can see at the center there is basically some of the most privileges you might have. And as someone that's third generation, black, male, I've got certain privileges, certain lack of privileges as well. And as you go out, you can see that there's certain elements that can impact your privileges as a human. I think this needs to be updated slightly because we've just come out of COVID and some people are still being impacted by this. But if you can't see this, there might be elements that you may not consider. So if you think about religion and culture, is it widely accepted, your religion and culture and belief? Is it something that's understood and accepted, or is it widely not accepted? What about your language? Luckily, I can speak English, just about. I can just about speak English. But are you trying to learn English? Is it something that you're not really connected to? Is English not your first tongue and it's really challenging for you? What about your housing? I'm lucky enough to own my own property, but I know a lot of people that have to rent just because of the environment we're in, but also some people that are homeless over time. And it goes into all the different elements that we may not consider when we're designing something that's ethical, which is really key. I'm going to talk about where I live. I still live here, which is quite lucky. I think, well, some people may not know where this is, but this is Walthamstow Leighton, one of my favourite places. I walk, run, and I've been here for probably most of my life. I'm 34 now, and I'll probably say for the last 28 years I've been in this area. Quite lucky to do that. And I've been able to see the local community evolve and change over time. I say I can walk past a couple of roads and I can hear so many different people's languages, cultures really come out. And that's my privilege, the ability to be around such a diverse environment and understand basically the world is so unique. It helps me open my mind. I'm not just seeing one lens of people. So going back to the whole purpose of this talk, it is about communities. I was lucky to do some work with Climate Labs, which is a great organisation. The co-founder there, Asan, if you can put your hands up and embarrass yourself. There you go. You can talk to him as well. We were commissioned to do some work with Power to Change, which is a non-profit that supports communities around the UK with funding to do climate action, to improve their communities. But they had a big problem, and I love this diagram. Tell me if you can see the green there. Barely. I love this because this really tells a story of underrepresented businesses, especially around communities. You probably, if you get a copy of this, you can see these little green lines. And it's a comparison between traditionally companies that get funded versus underrepresented businesses. And underrepresented businesses could be female founders, first generation, people of colour. They're not getting the right type of support they need to create new businesses, especially when it comes to community lenses. There was an interesting fact that for every £1 that's invested in a business, I think a penny is invested in female founders, and it could be worse for marginalised communities and businesses, which is a really scary thought. We had a really diverse team, and that was really important. We all came from different backgrounds. You can see Asan here, Phil, Rebecca, she's based in Mexico. amazing group of smart people. And then I joined in afterwards. I'm just joking. My terrible humour. But having a diverse team that had different skill sets as well as different backgrounds was really important to what we achieved. We were trying to create and reimagine that whole funding model for Power to Change to make sure that they can remove some of that complexity that we as service designers are so used to trying to solve, but also making sure that the community can have access to the right type of support, understanding whether this funding will be right for their business as well, which was really key. And it goes back to the whole element of trying to find the right path when it comes to ethics, when you think about human-centered design. What does that look like for you? How do you navigate the right type of areas, especially when you're focusing on such a challenging environment? Because this was just out of COVID when we were trying to solve this. So there are a lot of people that were impacted. I think most people know what this is. Classic service blueprint, probably the 101 of any server designer over time. It looks pretty, it goes through all the lanes of the front end, back end, behind the scenes, all the fun stuff, which is usually designed when you're creating a service blueprint, really. But this sometimes is misleading. It's a fancy picture that tells a story, but it doesn't really get people engaged all the time. I've worked on many projects in the past where we've put together a deliverable, a fantastic final presentation, everyone's energetic, then we never hear from them again, or the solution or service we want to develop never comes into place. We need to think beyond just a fancy artifact such as a service blueprint. We need to engage with the communities, the different stakeholders to understand what they need. We also need to consider what have they done in the past. We can't just go in and keep on redesigning things over and over and over again, because you're removing the power of those communities, but also those stakeholders that have direct and indirect impact on the service or solution you're trying to design. So going back to the overall funding model we were trying to redesign, it was really important to ensure that we had voices across the whole process. We ran a number of design sprints to ensure that we got people that were activists, grant writers, trustees, to help us think about the bigger picture. If you go back to the bench example, we didn't want anyone to be sleeping on the floor. We wanted them to be involved in the whole design process. And that was really key from day one. So that was one of our mandatory things we really wanted to ensure, giving them a voice and making sure that we're designing everything that just didn't support the end user, those community businesses, but also make sure that everyone knew that this was a more streamlined process. I'm almost finished now. I'm going to skip this slide for now. Another thing we also wanted to understand was make sure that we understood where they were coming from. So we've got people to share their stories, making sure that they understood what success looked like and they were able to communicate that to us. And if you're trying to sell server design in, you'll probably say, oh, IKEA, or let's say Salesforce, or even BT, I've done some amazing server design work. This can work. And to someone that's a non-designer, that's alien to them. By doing this, by getting them to actually come to us with ideas and solutions that work, which are focused on community, which focus on language that they understood, that created that buy-in over time. And that was really important to make sure that we had that buy-in from day one, really, which was really key part of our sprint. And always we wanted to make sure that we created a framework for the future. So you can see some fancy designs here. We wanted to make sure that we were not just thinking about climate action, or whether we were thinking about improving the funding model for communities, but we wanted to make sure that there was a long-term vision in place. And funny enough, they use some of these concepts, and you can see a similar design for their empowerment framework, which will help us design what their future will look like in the future. And some of the things that we did as designers was really key. As you can see there, they're working with communities to understand what good looks like and sharing how they wanted to perceive a future for communities going forward, which was really empowering. And the final slide now is really focusing on what the impact is. And it's still always evolving and growing. There's still a lot more that needs to be developed. And we know that this project was only a start. There's a whole tapestry of different projects that will come into place after our work over time. So it was really critical to make sure that we knew what our impact was, but we also knew that other designers, other work might come in as well to support it. It wasn't just something that we design and controlled as designers. I believe that's it. I believe that's 10 minutes, so maybe so. You should have access to some of these slides, but there's some key takeaways we had from working with Power to Change. So making sure you involve everyone across the whole system, tick, that was always important. Making sure that we can support local experts thrive over time. So making sure that they shared stories and they really understood what we were trying to create. And there was an ongoing dialogue, which was sometimes challenging. These people were extremely busy, and sometimes they didn't trust us as experts, as designers coming in to change the way they thought about things. We also understood that we couldn't solve everything by just one project. We knew that there was an ongoing process. So we could do some work, but we wanted to give them the tools so they can do the thinking for themselves in the future. But also, we also wanted to understand how we can change our mind about the world and about what we're trying to create. So then, I believe that's it. Here's some things in terms of you can contact us. I'm also on LinkedIn as well. We do have an ask. We're doing a really interesting project with an EV company, basically helping them support small businesses shift from petrol and diesel companies to EVs. If anyone knows or works for a startup that's thinking about that shift to get to net zero as a small organization, reach out to myself at ASA. And that's it.
Thank you so much. Brilliant. Another round of applause. Another round of applause for Daniel. That was really interesting. So we've got time for a couple of questions. Do you have any questions for Daniel? And Daniel, will you be joining us at the Hoop and Grapes later if anyone has any questions they want to ask you then, if they're feeling shy?
It sounds really bad, but it is going to be part of my bedtime around about 8. It's partly a joke, but people that know me the most, I am literally a morning person. So please contact me on LinkedIn as well, but I will be around just for a little bit, but not at the pub.
Yeah, that's fair. Protect your boundaries. But we do have a question, so take it away.
That was really great. I think my question is, I've come across this from a lot of other people who work in communities, that sometimes people in communities who are isolated or hard to get to, their views aren't always taken into account. And I mean, it's something that I think we would all struggle with, but like, do you have any insights into how we can start to try and involve those people, what that looks like?
Yeah, so I'm just going to repeat the question in case anyone at the back didn't hear it. We're talking about when you're connecting with a community, if people aren't necessarily always coming to big events and they're not connected to lots of things, how do you reach those kinds of people?
So there was a couple of things that we tried, and this project is not perfect in any way, but we tried our best. One of the key things was valuing their time. So there were incentives. So making sure that if they had to spend time away from their community job, or if they were looking after a loved one and had to take time to talk to us around their issues, we were going to pay them. I think there's this whole idea of, and maybe researchers might disagree with me, but sometimes, especially when you're working with communities, everything is for free, and then that almost devalues their insights. You need to reframe what that looks like over time. And another thing that we did, we tried to go to them. So we tried to look at the places, the environments, the communities that they were around and trying to get insights from them. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. So I can't see any more hands up, so I'm going to move smoothly on to the next speaker. Please give another round of applause for Daniel. And welcome to the stage, Kat, Maisie and Kate. We're going to be talking about using inclusive design methods to create a better railway. And you're all from different organisations, so I might just give you a chance to introduce yourselves. And please take it from here. Thank you so much.
Shall I go? Yeah. So I'm Kat Jennings from Common Collective. Common Collective was founded about 7 years ago now as a freelance collective of researchers, behavioural scientists and designers, focusing particularly on reducing social inequality. And we were founded to fund the Talking to Bees Foundation charity. So we're a bit of a different setup in that we're a social enterprise and a not-for-profit collective. And my background is in research and many years of working in transport research specifically. I'll hand over to, physical description. I'm a average height blonde woman wearing a navy top and navy corduroy trousers and navy boots as well. Very navy.
Thanks. Hi everyone, I'm Maisie Bowes. I am a customer strategy exec at East West Railway Company. I've been at East West Rail for 4 years now. Prior to that, I was a freelance service designer. And my visual description is that, again, I'm an average height white woman with fair hair with roots that definitely need doing. And I have my favourite pink glasses on, and I'm wearing mainly black and grey.
Hi everybody, I'm Kate Mesh. I'm here from Open Inclusion, which is a disability and age inclusive research organization. Really proud to have partnered with these two on this project. My visual description, I am a white person with gray hair, and I am wearing a red jumper, which I've learned to call a jumper since moving from the United States to the UK. And a pair of trousers that's really mostly inspired by my grandfather. So we're talking about old style pleats. That's, I think, a good visual description.
Yeah. Great. I'm going to kick us off. We're going to pass this around a lot. It's going to be quite clunky, I imagine, but we'll see how it goes. So what we're here to talk to you about today is using inclusive design methods to create a better railway. So I'm the client in this scenario, and I get to work with these lovely people. So East West Rail is a new railway between Oxford and Cambridge via Milton Keynes, Bletchley, Bedford, and it's being delivered in 3 stages. The first stage is already open, so Oxford to Bicester is already operating. Oxford to Bletchley will be operating by 2025. And Oxford to Cambridge, the whole shebang by early 2030s. So nice and vague delivery date there. So East West Railway Company is a small fish in the ocean of the UK railway network. But we have a very special remit, which is to use that small size to be an innovator, a disruptor, a test bed, whatever you want to call it, for creating a model for a change in how you deliver the railway. And in order to create better outcomes for the taxpayer, for our customers, and for communities. So we have permission, we have the remit to take the risk to try new things where the wider industry can't. Because the wider industry is so big, it is so massive, it is so heavy, old, and complex that it really struggles to change. And it certainly struggles to adapt to user needs. So I don't need to talk to this room about how you need to start designing your service with user needs, but it will probably not surprise you to learn that the railway network does not design to user needs. It should be shocking that that is the case because it has millions of users every day. You know, this is what people use to get to their jobs, to drive the economy, to get people out of their cars, and they pay huge amounts of money for the privilege of, you know, skanky old trains. But when you think about that user experience, it's not unsurprising that user needs are often not accounted for in the way that they should be in the railway. And this system only really functions well enough for some customers. There are so many customers that cannot use the railway as much as they want, how they want, and freely, independently, with confidence. There are an embarrassing amount of barriers to travelling by train. There are physical barriers that are rooted in the physical design of our stations and trains. There are cultural barriers, such as, you know, the ticket fares, that staff availability, rail strikes, like today. And there are the effect of that is that there are emotional barriers where the experience is so hard, so draining, that people don't want to use it at all. It's just too hard and it's not good enough, and we need radical change to close this rail travel gap, which is hopefully where East West Rail come in, because we need to change the way that the railway is designed, delivered and operated in order to address all of these barriers and to provide a service that gets the basics right for everyone. So I could sit here and talk to you all day about the barriers, but what's more interesting and more upbeat is letting these lovely people talk about how we've worked with Common and Open to gather these insights and the inclusive design methods that we've used and that have really set the tone for why we need to create an inclusive railway. I'm going to hand over to Kat.
Great. So when we first started working with East West Rail, one of the first things that we were asked to do was to do a project on access and inclusion specifically within the railway. So to speak to a diverse group of customers and understand their experiences. And one of the first things that we recommended was that applying that approach not just to the kind of first project, but to every project that we did afterwards. So the first project was a really broad scoping piece to understand and uncover more about those physical barriers, about the access needs that people have, about the pricing structure, about the cultural barriers. So can people show up and use the railway and feel safe and authentically themselves in the railway environment? And the emotional barriers, and making sure that rail travel is not as draining, it's not as exhausting, and it's not costing some customers a much harder kind of price to pay for travel than others. But we wanted to apply that not just to that first project, but to apply it to every project going forward. So on every project, we took an access and inclusion lens and applied that kind of questioning and that thought. So whether we were working on how do we design train carriages, or how do we design uniforms, or how does customer information work, we always wanted to make sure that we were questioning and understanding from a diverse group of customers. And we partnered with Open, and I'll let Kate explain a bit more about what Open do, because it was so important to the project to make sure that we were particularly considering the needs of disabled passengers, because the railway is very inaccessible on so many levels. It is the kind of physical, but it's much more than that. So I'll let Kate explain a bit about what Open do and why they were so important.
Thank you, Kat. Open Inclusion was founded, oh my goodness, now it's going to be 8 years ago. We got to roll over to a new year and say 8 years ago. And the main purpose of our organization, the driver behind what we do, is to make sure that disability and age inclusion is a part of the conversation in product design and service design. And the way we do this is really grounded in participatory design. So I think where we're all making progress now is that we're starting to see that we need more participation from a much more diverse group of customers and users when we're getting people into the room. One of the things that we're committed to as an organization is also making sure that when we design research, we get that piece in co-participation with people whose lived experience can inform our design, so we can get ahead of some of the challenges that we might have that are barriers to participation before they arise. So our work, we have a group of over 1,000 community members who have lived experience of disability or older age. So people who will say, the quick summary is, I'm not any deafer than anyone else who's 93. Yes, but do have access needs for accessing products and services. And inside that community, we have representatives who work with us to vet original research designs and help us decide, where are the barriers that are going to arise? So we love working with Common Collective because we're really aligned on the idea that the research approach needs to be more inclusive. And what we bring in is access to the lived experience of people who can co-design before we bring out the remaining phases of the project.
Great. Thanks, Kate. So we just wanted to go through a kind of few things and tools that we've used on this project, on these projects. And really open up for discussion and kind of thinking about how we can evolve this going forward, because it's very much a work in progress. and we'll be sharing both from East West Rail, but also from a few other projects, because obviously we in Open have a kind of much broader kind of range of experience. So I think I've already covered the kind of first one, which is really making sure that we're raising the topic in the brief. So really looking at each brief through an access and inclusion lens. So for example, with the project on uniforms, we wanted to make sure that we were considering gender and sexuality in that. So how might we kind of consider those perspectives? We're wanting to consider things like faith and how we can make sure that uniforms are inclusive and accessible for people who might be wearing them, but also from a kind of customer perspective and understanding how can uniforms help people with different access needs, kind of access and understand who is staff and what their roles are within an organisation. So it's just one example of how right at the kind of design stage we'll think about kind of access and inclusion. The next one is to upweight and amplify. So we had a lot of discussions often when we were presenting back research, because we very deliberately upweight and amplify the perspectives of a really diverse group of people. So part of that is making sure that every project had open inclusion doing work, but we also made sure that we included gender diversity, ethnic diversity within our samples, sexuality, faith, parents, because parents kind of with small children might face different barriers to accessing the railway, and temporary access needs, health conditions, lots of other kind of different barriers, which affect a kind of really broad group of people within society, but we wanted to make sure we were considering and deliberately kind of upweighting those on every project, particularly because they can often be underrepresented in rail users. And then when we're in sessions, making sure that we're proactively exploring the issues. So we do that through using lots of different methods. So we very rarely just use one method of just interviews or just doing workshops. We often bring in online kind of AI-powered desk research using social media sources or surveys or observations or lots of different perspectives, because different perspectives give us different views on things. And then sensitively asking and prompting for experiences. So that might involve bringing in examples or experiences or data around issues that people might experience in using the railway, and using those as conversation prompts to raise these topics. Because I think often people may internalise or not feel confident talking about their experiences when they've been excluded. So how can we kind of raise and make sure we're talking about these topics? Kate, I'll hand back to you to chat a bit about inclusively design.
Sure. So I think I jumped ahead a little bit on inclusive design. That focus for us has meant that we, as I said, really look into what it's going to mean to ask people to participate in different ways. So saying our idea for this study is that people are going to take a rail journey. Where are we going to have some difficulty? Asking participants in our research team, where are we going to have difficulty around built space environment? Where are we going to have barriers to participation for people who no longer use rail because they've had negative experiences? What can we do to make sure that the design is flexible enough that these participants can bring insight, even if what they're doing in one case was an imaginary rail journey for someone who no longer uses the rail? How can we be flexible enough? And that's a huge part of participatory design.
Do you want to also chat about support and adaptations?
I do want to talk about support and adaptations. So let's be clear about this one. I really love that it has BSL as the image here on the slide. To have support and adaptations requires funding. To have a BSL interpreter available in the room means that you need to look ahead and say, we're going to need a BSL interpreter available in the room, or else we don't have access for BSL signers. So to look ahead and say, what support conditions are necessary and how can we think about this proactively is a large part of what we do in this joint project. Kat, I'm going to hand back to you.
Okay. Yeah, and so informed consent, so we use a tool which I'm sure a lot of you are aware of called Consent Kit. And my measure of success in informed consent is are people making different choices through informed consent? So informed consent is not, for me, it's not enough if someone simply has the information about the project but agrees to kind of participate kind of as you've expected them to. It's about them being able to make choices. So things like choosing not to have their video on, or people who want to take part over a phone call rather than be part of a workshop. So making sure that informed consent facilitates that kind of support and adaptations to make sure that everyone feels comfortable and able to participate. Trauma-informed and supportive is about making sure, and I think this links to the point about adaptations, about just making sure that there's time and budget available to have space in sessions to make sure that we're not kind of trying to cover too much. We have worked with therapists on project to make sure that the team have support and also participants have support afterwards if anything has come up that has been traumatic for them, and really understanding that a lot of people's experiences that we will be exploring will have been traumatic for them. So people who've experienced racism and abuse on the railway, or who've had really kind of traumatic experience through not having their access needs met on the railway. And then I think the final one on this is about kind of drawing on social listening. So on a lot of projects we worked with an organisation called Discover AI to do social media analysis. And that, particularly in a lot of these spaces, there is a lot of conversation and call for action within social media, and so making sure that we're harnessing and we're listening to those views and perspectives. Do you want to chat a bit about the next one, Maisie?
Yep, sure. So what was really important throughout this whole thing was that we were all on the same page. Having a service design background myself, I know exactly what it means to be doing this job, which really helps me as the client make sure that there's budget, make sure that there's time, setting expectations internally, and making sure that we bring all of our stakeholders with us throughout this research journey as much as we can do. But also that, you know, having a 10, 12-year program is a blessing and a curse, because I've got loads and loads of time to do this work, but I've got to make those insights last, you know, for 12 years. How do we make this meaningful for our staff for a long time? You know, how can we keep refreshing this, make people continuously assess, you know, am I making the right decision here? You know, what impact is this having on inclusion and accessibility? Have I just trodden over anything? And what's also really important is, you know, the reason why the experience in rail is one of the reasons it's so terrible at the moment is because it's so fragmented, right? So it's so important to be working with the wider industry and our partners to make sure that we are not creating another fragment in that industry, even if it's a better one. And that's where, you know, knowing that organisations like Common and Open are working with our industry partners really helps us all work together in the same direction. Anything else?
No, I was just going to say the only other thing that we did, which was a bit unusual, was that we set up East West Rail as the data owner, so they have access to condense, which means that at times when Maisie and her team have been going back to kind of evidence concepts, they can go back to the customer voice and capture those insights. So we wanted to make sure that it wasn't all reliant on just kind of PowerPoint decks or just on kind of the knowledge of the team. It was really accessible and possible for your team to go back and use it to kind of help support the business case.
Yeah.
I think that's it. The only thing, I've got one other thing, which I'm terrified of pressing, doing the wrong thing. Common at the moment is working on a project with Crohn's and Colitis UK. It's Crohn's and Colitis Awareness Week. I also have colitis, and it would be amazing if anyone here has Crohn's or colitis. The link will take you to a survey, but also if anyone is on social media, if you could help us share the survey, because we're trying to reach far and wide with the project at the moment.
Thanks.
What a talk. What a brilliant talk about a really applicable topic where we can all take things away. I definitely think I've got loads of little nuggets of insight, like better ways to get consent from people. It's not just a binary yes or no. So yeah, absolutely massive round of applause for you guys, and thank you so much. So we're going to have our next speaker now, Disha. So Disha recently graduated from UCL, and she did an amazing talk. She's about to do an amazing talk about situational ethics. So I will hand the mic right over to Disha. And I also have something else to say, which is we have a new regular 5-minute slot for people who want to get into user research and service design. So Disha recently graduated. She's looking for roles. And I heard earlier that BT might be hiring, so there might be a great connection there to be made a bit later. So if you're in a position where you're also looking to get into service design, then get in touch with one of us and we can hopefully get you a slot.
Good evening. My name is. Good evening to everyone. My name is Disha Shanbhag. My pronouns are she and her. I am a short brown woman wearing a white and black colored dress with black shoes. Thanks a lot for the wonderful introduction, and I'm extremely grateful to everyone at Service Lab for giving me this opportunity. And I would wonderfully be a guinea pig for such occasions with such a great view. So I'm going to be speaking about my master's dissertation today, and for that I researched scheduling and recruiting apps used in London's hospitality and retail sector. The primary intent of the project was to understand how these technologies have an impact on people's social, economic, and interior lives. And I was primarily working with Indian international students who are working part-time. So I'm going to be speaking in relation to this dissertation about how I navigated and made ethical decisions, especially when I was on the field. So as an anthropologist, positionality is one of our favorite words, and we constantly talk about it and reflect upon it. And I feel that's very important and relevant to today's topic as well. So my positionality as an Indian, particularly as a student born and brought up in a city like Mumbai, was very relevant and helped me gather a lot of my participants, despite having chosen an ethnographic method, which was classical and intimate in nature. Moreover, having the privilege of not working in a low-skilled sector throughout the year, I was able to distinguish myself from my participants. This privilege also made me cautious about how my subjective opinions would be received, and particularly when I was talking to my primary participants. But to intentionally keep a check on what my personal views were and what were the views that I was coming up when I was interacting in the field, I maintained a diary. And this gave me a space to vent out my feelings, and I was able to maintain a healthy distance with everyone, which I feel is an essential requirement every time you have to make a decision when you're on field. So now I shall be presenting 2 scenarios from my fieldwork that I believe I tackled ethically. The first scenario that required me to make a situational decision was on the very first day of fieldwork. Initially, I was interested in simply uncovering the issues that students encountered at the workplace, but during a very initial conversation with one of my participants, I realized that that it took them a lot of time to even bag a part-time offer in London, a stable part-time job offer, and realizing that these jobs even were like essential for their for covering their living expenses, I realized that I didn't want to interfere in their work lives, and that led to me a kind of appropriating my research method, which was participant observation. What I did in that case was I started hanging out with them in their non-working lives. That is, I would accompany them to grocery runs, I would go to parks with them, get coffee, go to the pub with them sometimes, anything and everything just to assimilate myself into their life. This helped me gain a scale and just gain an understanding of what their life looked like on a daily basis, and then also scope the scale and intent of my research. These hangouts were both online and offline, designed according to the mood and schedule of the student employees. This change kind of changed the trajectory of my research, but it also helped me make a lot of decisions about and discuss with my participants what their ideas about situational limits were, what privacy meant to them, and what representation meant to them, and how would they like to be represented during at the end of this project. And I think that is a sign of a very healthy participant and researcher dynamic. The second instance for my ethical decision-making skills was when I was about to start interviewing my secondary participants, that is, the managers and owners of retail and hospitality businesses in London. And this was a bit trickier because I wasn't used to talking to people who were from this sector. So while a few of my primary participants, that is the student employees, were open to introducing me to their managers, I decided I didn't wish to take that route. As a result, I spent my afternoons for a week in Camden Market looking for any and every manager and owner who was interested in talking to me. Several rejections later, I interviewed a total of 3 managers of small to medium-sized companies, one of whose job descriptions required them to know how to use shift scheduling apps, the ones that I was particularly interested in. So I got into semi-structured, I was able to do semi-structured 40 to 1 hour interviews with each of them, and this gave me rich employer and manager perspectives without having to be burdened by the guilt of having interfered into the socioeconomic lives of of the student employees I was working with. But at no point during this entire process do I feel that I developed this sense of situational ethics intuitively. There's a lot of things that were going on in the background that kind of then led to me having this skill at the end during fieldwork. I find the ethnographic training, and particularly UCL Anthropology's approach towards ethics, trained me when I was on field. So at UCL, during our teaching terms, we were expected to attend research method classes that detailed ethical best practices and departmental ethics procedures. These learnings were combined with compulsory training in GDPR and other data protection laws. Moreover, as digital anthropologists, that is, as researchers who are trained to employ digital methods as well as research digital and virtual spaces, we were also lectured on ethical norms and sensitivity that platform-based fieldwork requires. Overall, by the end of this process, particularly in the last few weeks that I've gotten to just reflect on the process of my dissertation and look at it from a faraway lens, I have realized that that formalities required by fieldwork can very easily make ethics into a process of checkboxing. That is, the checkbox method while I believe that the checkbox method guarantees the safety of the researcher and the institutions that the researcher is linked to, it is necessary to embed an understanding that views ethics as a part of the very fabric of research, in my opinion. And I believe that being ethical is a step ahead of being law-abiding. To be truly ethical then as a researcher, again, in my opinion, is going beyond the boundary of simply ensuring everyone's physical and emotional safety. It means that one has to speak from and constantly negotiate with and reflect on the humanity of the situation, look at the needs, wants, and positionality of the people one is working with, and then from that position act. So yeah, that's the end of my dissertation and what I felt was situational ethics, and I'd like to term it like that. Thank you to everyone for listening to me, and again, I'm really grateful to for providing for the Service Lab to provide me with this opportunity. As a recent graduate who is also interested in particularly working at the intersection of digital and design. I am currently on the job market and I'm looking for internship, junior and freelance positions and would appreciate any leads on the matter. Furthermore, I'm always interested in a chat and I'm looking forward to talking to more of you at the end of this. And for anyone who's interested, I've just put a QR code which will lead you to my contact details. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Disha. I think we can all remember kind of like entering the job market and what a difficult kind of process that is. And Disha also didn't mention her previous experience working in the public sector before. So yeah, of course, get in touch. And I think some really interesting takeaways there about going further than just legal frameworks and making sure that we're ethical all the way through our design practice and going further with that. So just a brilliant talk and another round of applause. I think it was very much necessary. So I will now hand over to Best, and this is an exciting moment.
So last but not least, here comes the last speaker. So I'd like to introduce a little bit about Afreen. She is a founder of 100 Cakes, her own company, which is a strategy research studio. And she's also a digital anthropologist as well. So we're gonna sort out the mic just a little bit. So in the meantime, I'll carry on. So yeah, she's also a digital anthropologist and she developed the principles of designing with care. That's what she's gonna be talking about today. And also her topic is the reason why we asked you to put the star signs on the name tag. So finally the surprise review. So yeah, she'll be talking about her project on astrology and finance and how these two fields are connected. So yeah. Yeah, all right, over to you.
I'm ready after a few different technological mishaps. It's really quite nerve-wracking being the last one after all these amazing speakers, so I hope that I'll keep you all interested in what I'm going to talk about. So yeah, it's a bit left field, so I think it's a good one to end on today. This is a question I posed to you. Can astrology be a data science? And how might this help us design with care? Two very big, vague questions, but I just want a show of hands. So, show of hands for people who think, astrologers can be data scientists. 100, for sure, put your hands up. Okay, we've got some believers. What about 50%? Like I'm kind of there. Okay. No way. Who says no way? Any more? Okay, I'm going to turn you into a believer at the end of this. That's what I'm trying to get to. This is can anyone tell me what this is? Anyone have a guess? Natal chart. Yes, it is. And it's a piece of data, but can anyone in this room decipher it? I don't think so. Same thing with this. Can anyone tell me what this is? Any guesses? Just shout it out, it's fine. Yes, it is some kind of dashboard. It's basically how a company might perform in the future. The natal chart you saw was for my business. So I've asked an astrologer and I've asked a business person like, hey, how's my business going to perform? There's two ways of looking into this thing. But it's just to demonstrate that it's a form of data, right? It's a form of meaning making. But before I get into all of that was just a little teaser. I'll just quickly explain what 100 Kicks is, who I am. So 100 Kicks is my business. I actually forgot to visually describe myself, which I'll do now. So I am a 5'5" South Asian woman wearing a forest green suit and Adidas trainers. And the color of my suit matches the rest of my presentation, which is great. I definitely thought this through. So 100 Kicks is actually my second name, which is Saulat. Saw is 100 in Hindi and Lat means kicks, and that's where the name of my business comes from. I founded it to do product and research strategy by we want to work with teams that want to design with care. And what I mean by that is not just tacking on inclusion at the end of things, but actually building that from the ground up. So just like all the other speakers, what they've been talking about, I've got the same sort of ethos, like that's what we want to be doing. We want to be doing culturally competent design research, so not just being culturally sensitive. We actually want to embed ourselves. So like Disha, I'm also an anthropologist, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And that really kind of defines what we are trying to do so that ultimately product teams can go ahead and confidently build products for the global majority. And cultural competency, I think similar to what the previous speakers have said, it's about being able to embed yourself, respect and understand folks from different cultural backgrounds. And it also involves being aware of your own cultural upbringing and how that has an impact on what you understand and how you see the world. So super important. Why do we do it? Because we care, and I think care is a long-term strategy. It's not just a word that you can throw around, but it's actually leads to sustainable growth, and it's an inside-out approach. So if you care about your team, you care about the work that you do, you build products carefully. So today's talk will be around some designing with care principles that we came up with off the back of this astrology and finance research that we did. But before I do that, I'll tell you a little bit about my journey and like why I got interested in all of this. So I'm Afreen and I care. I care a little bit too much sometimes and I need to chill out. And I trained as a sociologist initially, and I just was super interested in, you know, why, like what technological progress is, questioning that, like what, you know, progress for the sake of progress, I kind of think lots of us in this room question. I also did the same master's as our other alumni here, which was great fun. And I don't know, I think I had really high hopes for ethical research in like industry, but they were quickly shattered. Working as I've always been a contractor, and I've worked in big tech, like I've worked at places like Google and Facebook, I've worked for government clients like MOJ, and yeah, it was quite sad. I think what I expected to happen in industry wasn't really what I'd learnt about at uni. Sorry, Disha, hopefully it'll be different. But you know, it kind of got me questioning after many years of like crying in the bathroom, like why does this lack of care exist? And I think tech bro culture, I think is a big part of it. You know, I think, you know, we tend to emulate ourselves to what we see going on in Silicon Valley and kind of what we see happening in kind of media culture. And that does bleed into how we do things. So I think now we're hopefully turning a point here and questioning those practices. But it is something that we need to be talking about, because that outpricing the local community. So I know that we've had conversations about this. People who are building this tech bro culture also means creating in a space where we're creating for people that who actually can't afford most of these things, or we don't take into account the people who use these services. Ego-driven work practices. So a lot of these places that I've worked in, it's all about how quickly you can design something and sell it on and ship it fast. There's no time to care. And there's no time to care because work and life, it's kind of the same thing. You know, you're forever imbued within that. So all of that kind of broke me down after a while, and I just got tired. So, you know, all these places that I'd worked in who I thought were going to be really, really cool places were just conforming to a status quo. And so I'm just kind of like, how can we move away from designing things that are just designed in our own image to actually designing for the people that we claim to care for, right? So that's why I'm trying to get us to all think about designing with care. So I've been running 100 Kicks for a year, and after the year was done, we did a reflection practice. And I think that is a big part of doing ethical research or ethical design in general, is like, can you build time in your practice to look back at what you've done and think, hey, like, did that make sense? Could we have done things differently? What have we learned in this year that we've done so far? And when I did the same thing, this is kind of what came out of it. So at the top here, you'll see like this is really grainy actually, but I'll talk through it. These are some of the projects that I'd done. So when I say 100 Kicks, it's mainly me, but I'll also get other people to collaborate with me. And one of the projects was about genomics, so looking at how scientists who look at genomic data, how they can make decisions, predict like who's going to get what, basically. So a decision support service for them, what does that look like? And another one was about a startup who wanted to give financing to up-and-coming businesses, so them predicting like how well a business would do, like do they deserve finance or not. And one was for the Department of Levelling Up and Housing, and they were trying to collect data around homelessness, and like the NHS to see like NHS and the MOJ, I think, to see how people move through a system, especially people who are homeless, because if you're homeless, you may be more likely to go through those systems and be kind of clocked into those to predict like the likelihood of ending up back on the streets, for instance. And at the end of the year, I was like, wow, these are all weirdly related to predictions, and everyone wants to predict the future, and nobody is happy with, everyone's uncertain. And, I have a lot of privilege in that I had enough time to be able to look back at this and reflect on it, but also think, okay, some of these practices and the way we did research wasn't really great. What if we did our own research piece around predictions that wasn't client-led, that we just kind of came up with? How would we explore predictions? And so came the weird and wacky idea of astrology and finance. And it was just because I've worked at a fintech, I saw people sitting in front of these charts and making decisions about, where this elusive market would go. And I saw astrologers doing the same about where my life would go. So I thought, okay, kind of seems the same. So why not just explore it? And that was where the hunch came from. So yeah, this is just to reiterate, all these projects had the connective thread of being predictive models, and these impacted people in very real ways, right? So what we were doing was actually kind of inevitable and timely. And I think it's really interesting to take time out, and I think I would encourage that, I think, as a way of practicing ethical research or ethical design is, can you take yourself out of the everyday to go and do a research project that isn't drowning in deadlines or drowning in having to meet a client's needs. So you can go and explore what research really needs to be or what an ethical practice might look like. And that's kind of what we did here. And it led us to some really interesting learnings. And also as a side note, this is a growing area. Like CoStar, I don't know how many of you have used it. They've raised 13 million. And it's a growing industry because, again, it's a form of data collection, right? And making sense and making meaning of data. So I think that's just like an interesting anecdote. And how did we do it? Well, we were funding this, so it was quite, you had to be careful about how we went about it. But we interviewed 6 astrologers and 6 folks who worked in finance, but had a forecasting role. So that means like they were making some sort of assumptions or predictions about the future. And we shared clearly written participant information, like that a layman can read and understand exactly how their data is going to be used, where it's going to be stored, why we're doing this research, just like being super obvious. Like my mum can read it and she's like, yeah, cool, I get that. Incentivize them, which I know that we've spoken about earlier. And we also asked them for feedback at the end of each research session. We said, hey, like, what did you think of the questions that we asked? And we were very open with kind of what we were researching and the kind of insights we were collating as well. Like once we finished our research, actually, we shared our initial insights with the folks that took part in this research, just to affirm that, hey, we aren't telling a different story to what you told us, right? And yeah, I think this is what we came out with, which was really funny. So this is a side-by-side comparison of what happens if you go for an astrology reading versus if you go to a financial director. But yeah, I think what made me laugh was that on an astrology website, it always says readings are for entertainment purposes only. But if you go to anywhere for investments, it's like capital is always at risk, So either way, they're actually more similar than they are different. They both, ask for data. They all both make meaning of data before they're going to actually interact with their client. This is the interaction with the client. I'm not going to go into detail on this because I think we're running out of time. But yeah, I think what was ultimately very fascinating for us was that these two seemingly opposing areas are actually very, very similar. But what's interesting about a system like astrology is because it's been around for millennia, it's almost had a chance to learn from itself about the hubris of data science. I think nowadays we tend to think that, data science is the way forward and we have all the answers, but actually we don't. And there's something to be learnt from how we can use predictive models, but how we can do that with care and make sure that we're not centering the numbers, but that we're centering people. And that's the main thing I think that we learnt from our conversations with astrologers as well, is that this is, a little map of how an astrologer versus somebody who works in finance might be using these different tools and how they might be coming up with their answers. And these are some of the principles that we came up with. So they range from there's just 5, designing for flexibility and adaptability, doing person-centric predictions, taking into account any biases that might be underpinning design decisions. How can you start to design for active contribution, responsibility and empowerment, and designing for increased transparency, by actually showcasing the human knowledge that's gone into building whatever product it is that you are now kind of showcasing. We took this to MozFest. I don't know if anyone here has been to MozFest. It's Mozilla's annual festival, which is, you know, kind of, they celebrate kind of data activism and lots of fun stuff. So we did a workshop there where we basically got folks to come along and apply these principles to existing applications. And I'm going to end the talk on taking you through how we applied it to a dating app. So this is like a quick little showcase of how we did it. So yeah, it led to new learnings. So like if we were to apply it to a dating app, for instance, the first one is about flexibility and adaptability. Some of the ideas that came through MozFest were, maybe if you've gone on a date and it's been, you know, not that great, or it has been great, like it might be useful for dating apps to design some sort of check-in so that a person might be allowed to, you know, process their first thoughts. And this goes along with this idea of having ongoing communication. So you feel safe, you feel cared for. Individualized analysis, seeing dating apps as a reflective tool. So at the moment, I know that nobody really knows how you get matched to anyone, but having some form of transparency or some insights into why you're getting shown certain people might make it something that's a little bit more accessible. Designing whilst taking into account biases. So within the design teams, it's important to actually talk about your own experiences, why those might be having an impact on what you're creating, how you're researching, and what kind of features you're implementing. So this means that researchers can ask better questions as well moving forward so they can design better and understand the lived experiences of their users. Designing for active contribution. So how can we allow people to communicate effectively communicate effectively to the people that work within the dating app. You know, at the moment, if you have any issues, you don't really know where anything has gone. So this is a good way of like making sure that you've got a feedback loop in place. And finally, designing for increased transparency. So as I said earlier, the dating app algorithm is a mystery. I know it's a mystery for, you know, many reasons, mainly for making loads of money, but transparency regarding data collection and its role in the service development is an act of care, and I think is a duty of care for anyone who's working in these sorts of fields, and especially up-and-coming AI fields, to tell their users and educate them on. So yeah, thank you for joining me on that wild ride, and I hope that you might be able to apply those principles to your own work, perhaps, and I would love to see how you might apply them. And yeah, I mean, the QR code here is just, it takes you to my Calendly for a quick 20-minute chat, if you would like that. And yeah, follow us on Instagram. We've got Instagram and LinkedIn, because we're professional. And that's it. Yay.
Oh, that was really lovely, very interesting aspect that, yeah, we've learned so much. So just want to make some noise for the speakers. Thank you very much for being here. And yeah, yay. So yeah, we're running out of time, but then just want to recap a little bit of what we listened to. Started with Daniel thank you for introducing us to the view of privilege, and also highlight the importance of the community and left us with the key takeaways of how we can change our mind about the world we create. And next, with Kat, Kate, and Maisie, for sharing the work in progress that you are doing that I'm sure that affecting us all with millions of the users. So applying the inclusion lens and to close the travel gap and those 3 barriers. And then for Disha, so thank you I don't think this is, hello. Yeah, so thank you, Disha, for the enthusiasm and also for left with the question, what does it mean to be ethical? And also ethical goes beyond just checking boxes. And last one, Afreen. So yeah, thank you for sharing with us about the prediction model with care and the journey that, that bring you to the principles of those 5 principles that will stick with us after tonight, I'm sure. Yeah, so thank you and you all for coming to the service lab. And yeah, we have just a little bit before we go. Any community announcement, hiring, looking for opportunities, wanting to host us some space for next year? Anything? Yeah? All right. Okay, yeah. So yeah, we love to hear the feedback. So feel free to reach out to us, or after this we'll be around. So just feel free to come and tell us what you think about the event. And yeah. So yeah, there's a pub nearby. It's called Hoop and Grape. So when you go out, and then it's on the left on the main high street. So if we have to move from this space, and then we'll continue our conversation over there. But yeah, thank you, and thank you, BT, for hosting us. Thank you again. Thank you so much.